Family expects me to raise sister's kids because I'm childless. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My mother shoved the guardianship papers at my chest, screaming that my empty, childless life finally had a purpose. The veins in Barbara's neck were bulging, her face a mask of toxic, righteous fury. We were standing in the middle of my parents' stuffy suburban living room, the air thick with the smell of cheap potpourri and decades of suffocating family obligations. For 30 years, I have been the family disappointment simply because I chose peace over chaos. I am Nora, a 30-year-old financial analyst. I make good money. I own a beautiful, minimalist townhouse, and I am happily, unapologetically child-free. I built my life specifically to avoid the exact kind of screaming match I was currently trapped in. But my mother didn't see my hard-earned stability as an achievement. To her, my clean house and quiet weekends were an insult to her and my older sister, Chloe. Chloe was the golden child, the mother of two, the martyr. What do you do when your own mother tries to legally enslave you to protect her favorite child? I stared at the thick stack of legal documents Barbara was trying to force into my trembling hands. They weren't just standard forms. They were a death sentence for my freedom, drafted by a cheap lawyer to permanently transfer custody of my 8-year-old nephew, Leo, and my 5-year-old niece, Mia, directly to me. Chloe is overwhelmed, Nora, my mother shrieked, her voice echoing off the framed family photos that conspicuously featured everyone but me. She needs this. You have absolutely no real responsibilities. You sit in your sterile little house, doing nothing. It is your turn to step up and act like a real woman. She was gaslighting me in real time, pretending this was about sisterly duty and temporary burnout. But I knew the truth. I knew what was in the manila folder hidden in my tote bag. I knew about the stolen money, the secret flights, and the breathtakingly evil conspiracy they had orchestrated behind my back. My beautiful, quiet life had been hijacked, turned into a chaotic nightmare of crying children and unpaid bills, all while my sister was thousands of miles away living a lie. The trap was set, and they fully expected me to blindly walk right into it and sacrifice my entire future. But they had no idea what I had already discovered in the dark. The nightmare actually began exactly 3 weeks earlier, on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my pristine white living room sofa, enjoying a glass of expensive wine after a grueling day of financial forecasting, when my doorbell aggressively rang. I opened the door to find my sister, Chloe, standing on my porch looking completely frantic. She was wearing designer sunglasses despite the heavy rain, her hands nervously clutching a massive designer tote. Standing next to her, looking terrified and soaked, were 8-year-old Leo and 5-year-old Mia. Surrounding them on my immaculate porch were 3 massive, overstuffed suitcases. "I need a break, Nora," Chloe blurted out, pushing past me into my entryway. "A 2-week mental health break. The kids are driving me absolutely insane, and my therapist says I need immediate space to heal." Before I could even process what she was saying, she dropped the heavy bags onto my hardwood floor. "Wait, Chloe, I have a massive corporate audit this week," I stammered, completely blindsided. "I can't just take 2 young kids right now." Chloe whirled around, her eyes flashing with that familiar, manipulative venom she always used to get her way. "Oh, please, Nora. You have nothing else going on. You have no husband, no kids, no real stress. Just put them in front of the TV. I'm their mother, and I am drowning." The sheer audacity left me momentarily speechless. Mia started crying softly, clutching a ragged stuffed rabbit, her small shoulders shaking. I looked down at her, my heart instantly breaking for the innocent collateral damage of my sister's drama. "Where are you even going?" I asked, feeling a cold knot of dread form in my stomach. "Just away. Mom knows," Chloe snapped dismissively. She didn't hug her children goodbye. She didn't kneel down to tell them she loved them. She just turned around, ran back out into the pouring rain, jumped into her least luxury SUV, and sped off into the dark. I was left standing in my silent hallway with 2 weeping children and a sinking feeling that my carefully constructed life was over. I locked the front door, unaware that my sister was never coming back. The first 2 weeks were an absolute, unmitigated disaster of sleepless nights and chaotic mornings. My quiet, orderly sanctuary was immediately transformed into a chaotic war zone of spilled cereal, scattered plastic toys, and relentless exhaustion. I was running entirely on fumes, desperately trying to balance my demanding corporate finance job with school drop-offs and bedtime tantrums. But the hardest part wasn't the physical labor, it was the emotional toll. Every night, Leo would sit by the front window, staring down the dark street, asking when his mom was coming back. Every night, I had to lie to him. By day 14, the promised end of her mental health break, Chloe's phone was still going straight to a generic voicemail. I texted my mother, Barbara, demanding answers. My phone buzzed instantly. "Stop being so selfish, Nora. Your sister is going through a terrible crisis. Just watch the kids. You literally have nothing better to do." The blatant disrespect made my blood physically boil. How do you respond to a mother who views your entire existence as a convenient dumping ground for her favorite child's mistakes? Things escalated dramatically the next morning. I was dropping Leo off at his expensive private elementary school when the headmaster pulled me aside into a quiet, judgmental office. He handed me a crisp, formal letter with a heavy sigh. "Ms. Vance, we have been incredibly patient, but Chloe's tuition payments are completely delinquent," he said softly. "She hasn't paid a single dime in over 5 months. If the balance of $14,000 isn't settled by Friday, Leo will be officially expelled." My stomach completely dropped into my shoes. $14,000? Chloe drove a brand new SUV and wore luxury clothes. She constantly bragged on social media about her lavish lifestyle and expensive spa days. Where on earth was all her money going? I rushed back to my car, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. I called Barbara again, demanding to know about the school debt, but she immediately hung up on me. The terrifying silence confirmed that my mother was actively hiding something huge. The pressure campaign kicked into high gear exactly 2 days after the school expulsion warning. I was aggressively scrubbing crayon marks off my kitchen wall when I heard a loud, demanding knock at the door. It was my mother, Barbara. She wasn't carrying groceries for the kids, and she wasn't bringing apologies. She was carrying a thick, official-looking manila envelope, and she had a deeply fake, patronizing smile plastered across her face. "I'm here to help you solve this little problem, Nora," she announced, marching into my kitchen and tossing the heavy envelope onto my granite island. I opened it cautiously, pulling out a stack of dense legal documents. The header read, "Temporary guardianship and transfer of financial liability." My heart began to pound violently against my ribs. "What exactly is this, Mom?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "It's just a temporary measure," Barbara said smoothly, waving her hand dismissively. "Chloe needs more time to find herself. If you sign this, you can legally make educational and medical decisions for the kids. It's best for everyone." I scanned the dense legal jargon. "This says I assume all financial responsibility for their current and future educational debts. You want me to take on Chloe's $14,000 debt? Why can't she pay it?" Barbara's fake smile instantly vanished, replaced by her trademark toxic glare. "Because she has real problems, Nora. She is a mother under intense pressure. You are a single woman with a massive savings account and a selfish, empty lifestyle. It is your absolute duty as a sister to absorb this burden. Why are you always so obsessed with money?" The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was demanding a financial sacrifice. She was trying to legally bind me to my sister's catastrophic failures while mocking my success. "I am not signing anything until I speak to Chloe directly," I said firmly, sliding the papers back across the counter. Barbara's eyes narrowed into terrifying, hateful slits. "You will regret this," she hissed. She slammed the front door so hard the framed pictures in the hallway rattled. That evening, the atmosphere in my house was incredibly tense. I was vibrating with anxiety, entirely unable to focus on the corporate spreadsheets glowing on my laptop. The kids were finally asleep in the guest room, exhausted from a long day. I needed a distraction, so I went to gather Leo's dirty laundry. As I picked up his small backpack, a heavy object slid out and hit the floor with a dull thud. It was an old, cracked iPad that Chloe had given him years ago to play cheap mobile games. I picked it up, intending to plug it in so he'd have it for the morning. When the screen flickered to life, my heart skipped a frantic beat. The device was still logged into Chloe's primary iCloud account. For weeks, I had desperately tried to respect her privacy, but the aggressive guardianship papers and the unpaid tuition had completely erased my boundaries. My hands physically shook as I tapped the mail icon. The inbox was overflowing with unread messages, but one specific, bolded subject line from 3 days ago immediately caught my eye. Congratulations on your closing, Villa Azure, Tulum. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Tulum? Mexico? I tapped the email, my eyes frantically scanning the attached PDF document. It was a finalized, highly detailed real estate contract for a luxury beachfront condominium. The purchase price was entirely paid in cash. The buyer listed on the official document was Chloe Vance, alongside a man named Julian Sterling. Who the hell was Julian Sterling? Why was my mentally exhausted sister buying luxury property in Mexico while her children were facing expulsion for unpaid school tuition? A sickening wave of adrenaline crashed over me. I sat down heavily on the edge of the guest bed, listening to the soft, innocent breathing of the children she had carelessly abandoned in my hallway. This wasn't a temporary mental health crisis. This was a highly calculated, well-funded escape plan. I had to know exactly how deep this toxic rabbit hole went before my mother returned. I unlocked the iPad settings and began digging through her digital life. The breadcrumb trail I uncovered on that forgotten iPad was so profoundly horrifying it made me physically nauseous. I spent 4 hours sitting in the dark, meticulously scrolling through Chloe's synchronized digital files, screenshots, and buried financial emails. I found the terrifying answer to how she had afforded a cash purchase in Mexico. On April 12th, exactly 1 week before she dumped the kids on my porch, Chloe had completely liquidated Leo and Mia's 529 college savings accounts. She had ruthlessly emptied over $80,000 of money our late grandparents had left specifically for the children's education. But she didn't stop there. I found frantic, automated emails from 4 different premium credit card companies warning of severely maxed out limits. She had taken out massive cash advances, completely draining her available credit to secure liquid funds. There were also digital receipts from a high-end luxury boutique for designer luggage and resort wear, purchased the very same day she claimed she was too depressed to get out of bed. Then, the final, undeniable nail in the coffin, a confirmed digital boarding pass from a major airline. A one-way, first-class ticket to Cancun, Mexico. The departure date was the exact same morning my mother brought over those aggressive guardianship papers. My sister hadn't just needed a break. She had meticulously, coldly financially ruined her own children, stolen their entire future, and fled the country permanently. She had left me holding a bag full of massive debt and 2 traumatized kids. The sheer sociopathic cruelty of her actions was completely suffocating. I printed every single document, every transfer receipt, and every flight confirmation, stacking them into a massive, damning pile on my dining room table. I was no longer dealing with a stressed mother. I was dealing with a fugitive who had committed severe financial fraud against her own family. But as I dug into her hidden photo app, I realized the betrayal was much worse. Hidden deep within a locked folder on the iPad, disguised as a calculator app, I found her secret social media footprint. Chloe had maintained an entirely separate, highly curated Instagram account under a fake maiden name. My stomach violently churned as I scrolled through the pristine, heavily filtered grid. There were no pictures of Leo. There were no pictures of Mia. According to this digital fantasy world, Chloe was a carefree, single, childless socialite traveling the globe. Dozens of photos showed her lounging on yachts, drinking expensive champagne, and clinging to the arm of an older, distinguished-looking man, Julian Sterling. I clicked on a recent post, dated just 2 weeks ago. The caption read, "Said yes to my forever. Can't wait to start our beautiful, perfect life together in Tulum." She was flashing a massive, blinding diamond engagement ring at the camera. I cross-referenced Julian's name on LinkedIn. He was a wealthy, British expatriate real estate developer based in Mexico. He was clearly bankrolling this lavish new lifestyle. As I read through the sickeningly sweet comments from Julian's wealthy friends, a horrifying realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Julian Sterling had absolutely no idea that Chloe had children. She had completely erased Leo and Mia from her existence to secure a wealthy foreign husband. She wasn't just running from debt. She was actively burying her past to protect her lucrative new engagement. She had dumped the kids on me because I was the only person in the family stable enough to keep them alive, while she permanently reinvented herself. She weaponized my child-free lifestyle against me, using my peaceful home as a permanent storage locker for the children she no longer wanted. I felt a surge of pure, blinding rage that transcended simple family drama. This was absolute, undeniable evil. I took dozens of screenshots, making sure to capture Julian's profile and contact information. Then, my eyes drifted to a chain of bank transfer notifications that made my blood run cold. The worst part of this entire nightmare wasn't Chloe's sociopathic escape. It was the devastating discovery of who had helped her execute it. As I analyzed the PDF statements from the liquidated 529 college accounts, I noticed a bizarre routing anomaly. The $80,000 hadn't gone directly into Chloe's personal checking account. It had been legally routed through an intermediary bank before being wired offshore. I zoomed in on the account holder's name for the intermediary routing number. The name printed in bold black ink was Barbara Vance. My mother. My lungs completely seized up, entirely unable to draw in oxygen. My own mother, the woman who had stood in my living room screaming about sisterly duty and family loyalty, was an active, willing accomplice to this massive financial crime. Barbara had willingly allowed Chloe to use her established banking history to funnel the stolen college funds offshore, deliberately hiding the money from domestic debt collectors and the IRS. She knew everything. She knew Chloe was abandoning the children. She knew the tuition was unpaid. She knew about the secret wealthy fiancé in Mexico. While she was violently guilt-tripping me for being a selfish, childless woman, she was actively helping my sister steal her own grandchildren's future. The guardianship papers weren't a temporary fix. They were a highly calculated legal trap. Barbara was trying to legally force me to assume all of Chloe's massive domestic debt before the creditors realized she had fled the country. My mother was completely willing to sacrifice my financial stability, my career, and my entire peaceful life just to ensure her precious golden child could live a wealthy, lie-filled fantasy in Tulum. The level of toxic, enabling betrayal was so profound it physically hurt. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was a disposable asset. I picked up my phone, knowing I needed professional firepower to destroy this conspiracy. At 8 a.m. sharp the next morning, I was sitting in a sleek, glass-walled conference room in downtown. Across from me sat Marcus, a razor-sharp, no-nonsense family law attorney I had known since college. He was completely silent as he meticulously reviewed the massive stack of printed emails, wire transfers, and the horrifying guardianship papers my mother had tried to force me to sign. When he finally looked up, his expression was completely grim. "Nora, I have seen some incredibly toxic family dynamics in my career, but this is staggering," Marcus said, tapping his expensive pen against the offshore wire receipts. "If you had signed those guardianship papers, you would have legally accepted full liability for the unpaid private school tuition, and likely exposed yourself to the massive credit card debt she abandoned. Your mother set you up to be the financial fall guy." A cold, sickening chill ran down my spine. "Can we stop her?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Can we protect the kids?" Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. "Yes, but we have to be incredibly strategic. We are dealing with federal wire fraud, the theft of trust funds, and child abandonment. We need to document everything officially before they realize we know. You cannot let your mother know that you have seen these iPads or the financial trails. We need her to confidently walk directly into her own legal trap." We spent the next 3 hours drafting an airtight, devastating counterplan. I would pretend the pressure had finally broken me. I would act like the guilty, compliant, child-free daughter they always expected me to be. I would agree to sign the papers, but only in front of the entire family, ensuring maximum exposure. I walked out of Marcus's office feeling a terrifying sense of calm. The peacekeeper in me was completely dead. I was going to burn their beautiful, toxic illusion straight to the ground. The plan almost fell apart before it even began. I had just returned home from the lawyer's office and was quickly printing a secondary set of the financial evidence when the front door unexpectedly burst open. My mother had let herself in using the emergency spare key I had foolishly given her years ago. "What are you doing, Nora?" Barbara demanded, marching into my home office, her eyes instantly locking onto the glowing printer. I desperately slammed my laptop shut, throwing a blank folder over the freshly printed wire transfers. My heart was hammering so loudly I thought she could hear it. Just printing some work documents. I lied, my voice remarkably steady despite the sheer panic flooding my veins. Barbara aggressively crossed her arms, her face twisting into an ugly, triumphant sneer. Don't play games with me. The school called again today. You need to sign those guardianship papers right now, Nora. Chloe's peace of mind depends on it. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to look small and defeated. I can't just sign them on the kitchen counter, Mom. It's a huge commitment. Barbara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a vicious, threatening whisper. If you don't sign these papers today, I will personally call Child Protective Services. I will tell them you kidnapped these children and are refusing to return them to their legal family. I will destroy your precious corporate career with a single phone call. Do you understand me? The absolute malice in her eyes was chilling. She was willing to traumatize her own grandchildren with a CPS investigation just to protect her criminal daughter. I looked down, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper, forcing tears to well up in my eyes to sell the performance. Okay, I whispered, faking total submission. You win. I'll do whatever you want. But I had one strict, non-negotiable condition for my absolute surrender. I will sign everything, I told my mother, keeping my head bowed in fake defeat. But if I am permanently taking on the children, I want the entire family to witness it. I want Aunt Sarah, Uncle Dave, and everyone else to see that I am finally stepping up like you wanted. Barbara's eyes lit up with absolute, arrogant triumph. She loved an audience, and she deeply loved the idea of publicly humiliating me while cementing her golden child's safety. Fine, she said smugly. Friday night. At my house. We'll have a formal family dinner, and you will sign the documents in front of everyone. Don't be late. She turned and marched out of my house, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just eagerly agreed to her own execution. For the next 3 days, I lived in a state of hyper-focused adrenaline. I packed the kids' belongings, ensuring they were completely insulated from the upcoming explosion. I arranged for a trusted friend to take Leo and Mia to a fun arcade on Friday evening so they wouldn't witness the destruction of their grandmother. When Friday night finally arrived, I stood outside my parents' large suburban home, gripping a sleek black leather briefcase. Inside were the guardianship papers, the wire fraud evidence, the offshore bank statements, and the photos of Julian Sterling. But I wasn't walking in alone. I had brought Marcus. He was dressed in a sharp, intimidating gray suit, looking entirely unbothered by the impending chaos. Are you ready to blow up your family tree, Nora? Marcus asked quietly, adjusting his tie on the front porch. I thought about Leo crying by the window, and my mother threatening me with a false CPS kidnapping charge. I felt absolutely no fear, only a cold, righteous certainty. I pushed the heavy front door open, stepping directly into the lion's den. The dining room was packed with extended relatives, all sipping wine and buzzing with toxic gossip. When I walked in with Marcus, the room fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Barbara sat at the head of the long oak table, looking like a smug queen holding court. Nora, finally, my mother gloated loudly, gesturing to an empty chair. And who is this? I told you this was a private family matter. I didn't sit down. I stood at the opposite end of the table, placing the heavy black briefcase directly onto her expensive lace tablecloth. This is Marcus, I said clearly, my voice echoing in the quiet room. He is my attorney. Barbara's confident smirk instantly faltered, a flash of genuine panic crossing her eyes. You don't need a lawyer for this, Nora. Just sign the papers and stop being so dramatic. Aunt Sarah chimed in. Just do what's right for the family, dear. I unlatched the briefcase with a loud, sharp click. I am doing what's right for the family, I replied. I pulled out the original guardianship papers and casually ripped them entirely in half, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. The room gasped in collective shock. I am not signing a legal trap designed to make me liable for the $14,000 in unpaid tuition Chloe abandoned, I stated loudly. I reached into the briefcase again, pulling out a massive stack of color-printed documents. And I am certainly not enabling a fugitive who stole $80,000 from her own children's college fund. I slammed the bank statements and the offshore wire transfers directly onto the table, pushing them toward my stunned relatives. Here is the proof. Chloe didn't have a breakdown. She liquidated the 529 accounts, maxed out her credit cards, and bought a luxury villa in Mexico with a wealthy fiancé who doesn't even know she has kids. I locked eyes with my mother, who had suddenly turned as white as a ghost. And the best part, I continued, my voice slicing through the horrified silence of the dining room. I pulled out the final document, the intermediary bank routing trace, and slapped it directly in front of my mother. Barbara actively helped her do it. Our mother used her personal accounts to funnel the stolen money offshore to hide it from domestic authorities. The dining room erupted into absolute, unprecedented chaos. Uncle Dave snatched the wire transfers off the table, his face turning a furious shade of red as he read the numbers. Aunt Sarah covered her mouth, staring at Barbara in pure disgust. "Is this true, Barbara?" Dave yelled over the noise. My mother was violently trembling, gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were completely white. "It's a lie," she shrieked, her voice cracking with sheer desperation. "Nora fabricated this. She's jealous of Chloe. She always has been." I didn't even flinch. I just reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "It's not a lie, Mom. In fact, it's so real that an hour before I walked into this house, Marcus officially forwarded this entire dossier of evidence directly to Julian Sterling in Tulum." Barbara let out a horrific, animalistic gasp, clutching her chest as if she had been physically shot. The room went completely dead silent again. "That's right," I said coldly. "Julian now knows that his beautiful, childless fiancé is actually a fleeing debtor who abandoned 2 children and committed federal wire fraud. I also forwarded the bank traces to the IRS fraud division." The golden illusion was completely shattered, broken into a million irreparable pieces on the dining room floor. My mother collapsed into her chair, sobbing violently, entirely abandoned by the relatives who now looked at her like a dangerous criminal. I turned my back on the wreckage, walking out the front door forever. The absolute devastation that followed that dinner was swift, brutal, and entirely legally enforced. Chloe's lavish fantasy life in Mexico imploded spectacularly within 48 hours. Julian Sterling, terrified of being implicated in international wire fraud and disgusted by her hidden children, instantly canceled the wedding, kicked her out of the villa, and froze all shared assets. Without his wealthy protection, Chloe was forced to return to the U.S., where she was immediately met with federal investigators. She is currently facing massive felony charges for wire fraud and the theft of the trust funds. My mother, Barbara, didn't escape the blast radius either. The IRS launched a terrifyingly thorough audit of her entire financial history. She narrowly avoided jail time by cooperating with the investigation, but the legal fees and fines completely bankrupted her. She had to sell the suburban house she loved so much and move into a tiny, depressing apartment, entirely shunned by the rest of our extended family. As for me, I didn't just walk away. With Marcus's brilliant legal maneuvering, I petitioned the court and won full, permanent legal custody of Leo and Mia. But I did it entirely on my own strict terms. I refused to absorb Chloe's toxic debts, forcing the court to liquidate my sister's remaining domestic assets to cover the unpaid tuition and therapy for the kids. I legally severed all visitation rights for both Chloe and Barbara, ensuring those toxic women could never, ever manipulate or traumatize these children again. My pristine, minimalist townhouse is no longer quiet. It is filled with loud laughter, messy art projects, and the beautiful, chaotic energy of 2 children who finally feel safe. I traded my perfect silence for a family built on absolute truth. It has been 2 years since the night I blew up my family tree, and my life looks completely different now. The people who constantly mocked my child-free lifestyle were the exact same people who were willing to destroy innocent children for money and social status. I learned an incredibly painful but vital lesson. Being happily child-free never meant I lacked the capacity for deep, unconditional love. It simply meant I possessed the boundaries necessary to protect my peace from toxic people. When the time came, I was the only one strong enough to actually stand up and fight for Leo and Mia. We have built a beautiful, honest life together out of the rotting ashes of my parents' generational trauma. The kids are thriving in school. The nightmares have completely stopped, and they know without a shadow of a doubt that they are fiercely loved and permanently wanted. Sometimes, Toxic loyalty is the most dangerous weapon a family can wield against you. If you are sitting in the dark, being guilt-tripped, manipulated, and drained by relatives who demand you sacrifice your future to cover up their massive failures, hear this clearly. You owe them absolutely nothing. Do not let anyone weaponize your independence against you. Gather your evidence, find your allies, and do not be afraid to strike the match that burns the toxic illusion down. Protecting your own peace isn't selfish. It is the ultimate act of survival. Sometimes, the only way to save the innocent is to completely destroy the guilty.